Are you ready to step outside your comfort zone? Welcome back to Book Break. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of book recommendations if you're looking for something a little bit different. I can guarantee you have never read anything like the books on this list before. Unless you've specifically read one of these books, of course, but they are each very much one of a kind. So first up, Rabbits by Terry Miles. This is set in the same world as the Rabbits podcast, if you listen to that. It was this pseudo-documentary podcast about a missing person investigation that led the narrator into this alternate reality game called Rabbits, or The Game, which has been secretly going on for decades. So The Game has been taking place under all of our noses all this time. So if you suddenly start noticing strange coincidences, like the same number appearing over and over again in your life, or strange discrepancies, like the building across the road definitely used to have 2 windows and now it just has 1, it might be time to start following the clues and playing the game. Then I couldn't decide which of my Helen Oyeyemi collection to show off to you because she is such a weird and wonderful writer, but I settled on perhaps her strangest, Mr. Fox. Every time you pick up a Helen Oyeyemi book, you are in for a different experience, and Mr. Fox is no exception. So this is partly a short story collection, partly a novel, partly a battle of the wits. So Mr. Fox is a novelist in the 1930s, and Mary Fox, with an E, is his muse, until she comes to life and starts to talk back. So throughout the book, the 2 foxes engage in this competition, and we are jumping in and out of different stories that each of them are writing as part of this challenge. Often they're versions of the Bluebeard story being retold, and then also throughout the book, Mr. Fox's wife also starts to get her own voice and a fairy tale ending. So that was Helen Oyeyemi, and another writer who you can always trust to give you a whole new, unique experience is China Miéville. So I've got here this Census Taker, which is a horror novella that starts with a young boy witnessing some traumatic event, and it's narrated from an unspecified point in the future, and the story slips between first person, third person, even second person, sometimes even within a single sentence. And you constantly have to work out what's real and what isn't. The horrible thing that this boy witnessed at the start is just one of many horrible things that may have happened. And talking of things that may or may not have happened, probably the most famous book I've got on this list is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. So there is so much going on in this book, and it has such a huge cult following. At the centre of this book is the story of the Navidson family, who move into a new house that they discover is bigger on the inside than the outside. A literally impossible situation that they try to brush off until their 2 children go missing. So that would already be a very unusual story, but that is just one aspect of this book. First, we have to meet Johnny Truant, who describes himself as an unreliable narrator, who is looking for a new apartment, and one of the apartments that he visits used to be lived in by an elderly blind man named Zampano, who has recently died, and left behind in the apartment a manuscript that Johnny becomes completely obsessed with. The manuscript is a thick academic study of the documentary The Navidson Record, which is the documentary that Will Navidson made about that creepy house that his family moved into. And Zampano talks a lot about this documentary and how it achieved massive international success. Only the film never seems to have existed. Johnny can't find any evidence of it. It is absolutely bizarre. Every page is a completely different experience, and you will lose all sense of reality. A book that really puts you, the reader, at the centre of the mystery is S by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst. So this book is disguised. What you receive if you buy this book is The Ship of Theseus by V.M. Straker. It looks like an old library book. It's even got the little library sticker here. And when you open it, you discover that there are tons and tons of notes written in the margins. So you can really get like sucked in and believe that you just stumbled across this old book and you are uncovering a mystery. As well as the notes in the margins, you also get little postcards tucked between the pages, letters. We've got a little newspaper extract here. There are so many stories within stories to read here that you'll actually find whole articles and forums online of people discussing the best way to read this book. Do you read the book itself first and then go back and read the notes in the margins? Do you take it chapter by chapter? There's loads of different opinions out there. At the back here you have a little decoder, which I never even figured out how to use. I didn't even get deep enough into the mystery to work out where that played in. Now this chunkster here is XX by Ryan Hughes. Ryan Hughes is a graphic designer, and graphic design is key to this book. It is part sci-fi graphic novel about man's first contact with alien life, and it is part a meta novel where the extra textual elements are really part of the story itself. Hughes apparently wrote this book directly into InDesign. That's how key the design elements are to the book itself. It's one of the most intriguing looking books I've ever seen, and it's almost 1,000 pages long, so this book will take you on a journey. Oreo by Fran is a satire from the 70s about a girl with a black mother and Jewish father, which was equally shocking to both families, who sets off on a mission to find her estranged father. And the book constantly interrupts the plot with little charts, random extracts from diaries, word games, homework assignments. It's a very fun and playful book, and it's sort of a slant on the Theseus and the Minotaur story, but with a very feminist angle. And it's also very, very funny. The book is like half jokes. Hopscotch by Julio Cortázar is called Hopscotch because it reads like a game of hopscotch, jumping you from one chapter to another. So when you open the book, you are given two choices. You can start from the beginning and read forward, or you can follow a different path that takes you from chapter to chapter, seemingly in a completely random order, missing out some of the chapters from the traditional path, and then also adding in a few extras that aren't in the main story. So I know which path I would choose. And then another book that gives you a strange choice like that is The Dictionary of the Khazars by Milorad Pavic. So this has two versions, a male and a female. They are completely identical except for one crucial paragraph. So you're encouraged to read yours and then find someone who has the other version and compare. But the strangeness doesn't end there. The book itself completely rejects any semblance of a traditional plot. It is the imagined book of knowledge of the Khazars. So it's a collection of folk stories and history of this fictional culture, though inspired by real events. The Field by Robert Seethaler is unusual because this one is narrated by the inhabitants of the town's cemetery. So it's sort of a collection of interrelated stories as each of the late inhabitants of this town tells their story from when they were alive. So together it paints a picture of a community viewed from below. So it's very sad at times, very moving, but each of these stories really explores the meaning that each life holds. Then there's Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. So she is the author of Convenience Store Woman, and she wrote something a lot more bizarre for her second book. At first it reads like a YA story about two 11-year-olds, but don't be fooled, it gets very dark and twisted. The three main characters in this novel decide to reject the rules of society that they call the factory. They see themselves as aliens, different from Earthlings like you and me. In this book, society is brainwashing, but the alternative is pretty disturbing. The Family Fang by Kevin Wilson is about a family of performance artists with two grown-up children called Annie and Buster, who are not particularly well adjusted after a childhood growing up with parents who were dedicated to practical jokes and public pranks and generally subverting normality and using the children, who they called Child A and Child B, as props in their performances. So in this book we follow Annie and Buster, now grown up, returning home after their careers have started flailing. But soon after they return home, the parents disappear, leading Annie and Buster to lead the investigation, constantly unsure if this is just another of their elaborate pranks. And finally, the Rorschach text by Stephen Hall. In this one, Eric Sanderson wakes up with no memory of who or where he is. A note tells him to see Dr. Randall, who informs him that he is suffering from acute memory loss after the tragic death of his lover Cleo 2 years earlier. But as Eric starts discovering clues left behind for him by the first Eric Sanderson, you start to realise there is a whole other story going on altogether. And this story has a shark in it that swims through currents of information and feeds off memory. It is very conceptual, very weird, and I was completely obsessed with this. So I'll link here to a video where we recommended more quirky books if you're looking to step outside your comfort zone a little bit more. But I would love to know your favourite books like this that just feel completely brand new, unlike anything you've come across before. I can't get enough of them, so do leave a comment below with your recommendations, and we'll see you next time.